Right. Good evening and welcome to the town hall being presented by the Iota Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. My name is Carlos Clanton, and I have the esteemed honor of serving as the moderator for tonight's town hall. And we have a dynamic group of individuals who are going to engage in conversation. And so definitely talking about conversation. If you are watching tonight, we encourage you to place any questions that you may have in the comment section, so that we can engage with those later throughout the program. But I'm going to jump right in. Again, as I mentioned, my name is Carlos Clanton. I am the Vice President of Organizational Development for STOP Incorporated, but I'm also a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the Alpha Phi Lambda chapter here in Norfolk, Virginia, as well as I serve as the Ward 3 member of the Norfolk City School Board here in Norfolk, Virginia. I'm going to go right down the line and allow our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves, say a little bit about themselves and who they're representing. So I'll start right off, starting at the head with Cynthia Downs-Taylor, who serves as the first Vice President of the Virginia State Conference of the NAACP.
Good evening to our audience and to members of the Iota Omega Connection Committee, Town Hall Committee, and to others in terms of our panelists, good afternoon. I'm the first Vice President of the Virginia State Conference, NAACP. I am a former branch member, president of the Newport News branch, NAACP. I'm a member of Lambda Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority in Newport News, Virginia. I am eager to be here to help. I am also a political strategist, and I'm currently working a campaign. So I'm an all-around type of person as it relates to voting, civil rights, social justice, and representing the rights of other persons throughout the state.
Great, thank you. And now I'm going to ask for Dr. Karen Hills-Pruden, who serves as president of the Virginia Beach NAACP branch.
Yes, good evening. I am Dr. Karen Hills-Pruden, president of Virginia Beach NAACP. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I love having conversation with like-minded individuals. This is a critical year this year for a number of reasons. One, that we have a number of elections that are going on, as well as we have quite a few of our younger individuals who have took to the fight for what we are trying to call attention to. And so I'm excited to be here with like-minded people, and thank you for inviting me.
Great, thank you. We have Ms. Helena Dodson, who serves as president of the Chesapeake NAACP branch.
Good evening to everyone. I am Helena Dodson, now serving, and that is the word, serving the Chesapeake area for the NAACP. I am happy to be here with you, sharing information and gaining information. I am also a 50-year member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority. Now my membership is with the Upsilon Omicron Omega chapter in Norfolk, Virginia. So I'm happy to be there. And also I work with youth in another organization called Top Ladies of Distinction that has many of the issues and many of the growing pains and knowledge that we try to put off to our youth so that they will truly be leaders of tomorrow. I am just happy to be here to share information, and hopefully we can get through this.
Great, thank you. And we're gonna head right on across the water to my brother from another mother, James Boyd, president of the Portsmouth NAACP.
Thank you so much, Carlos, and thank you for what you do in our area and in our nation. And it's certainly a privilege to be on with everybody. As Carlos mentioned, my name is James Boyd. I'm president of the Portsmouth branch of the NAACP. So happy and honored to be with my fellow freedom fighters, my sister presidents of the surrounding branches in the area. And certainly this is an important time for us. It's an important moment. And I'm glad that we can get on here to strategize and think about how we can be active, involved in this moment that's so important to our community, to our people. So thank you so much for having me.
Great, thank you. And on the other side of the water, the Bay, we're so glad to have her, Delegate Marcia Price, who represents the 95th District in the Virginia House of Delegates, who's going to definitely bring a little bit more about some of the constitutional amendments that are going to be on the ballot this coming November. But Delegate Price, did you want to greet everyone?
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you to my sisters of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and loving the Greek love here. And shout out to the, just revolutionary branches of the NAACP. Thank you for all that you do to bring the energy so that we can get positive changes in the General Assembly.
Great, thank you so much. And so again, we are 1 hour of your time, but we're going to make this one impactful hour. So we're going to dive right in. So the first question that I have is, what is the most important challenges facing our communities, and how will voting this November address them? And so I'm going to open it up. Who'd like to start first? I'll call on because I know all of y'all now.
Okay, the challenges are many, especially given the circumstances that we are operating in and living in, given COVID-19. In addition to this, which is a good thing, but then again, it's caused some challenges. We, as a result of our voting last year and changing the numbers in the General Assembly, were able to get a lot of new legislation as it relates to voting and voting rights pushed through. And Delegate Price, I know you've been a part of all of that, and you probably will talk about it. But if anybody asks, what do I get for my vote? All we have to do is look at last year as a result of our voting and what we were able to get done this year with many of the changes as relates to early voting, absentee voting, you name it, the drop boxes, you name anything that we're doing now. And it's so much, and that's when I talk about the flip side of it, it's so much that we've changed. The challenge is now is making sure that we educate the community as to what's going on and that they understand and that we speak with one voice. I keep hearing people saying that we have absentee in-person voting. Call it what it is, what we fought for many years. It's early voting. That's what we have. Take the absentee out of it altogether and talk about early voting. And we don't hear enough people just saying that and sounding that tune, early voting, and explaining it to a person. So every time I get a chance to talk to any of my family and friends, the first thing I tell them, you can go vote now. Mm-hmm. So that's it.
Great, great. Anyone else like to add to that?
Carlos, that early voting that Cynthia just spoke of is very, very important. There were a lot of people who really worked to get that particular thing done. I know in the city of Chesapeake, we started our early voting on the 18th. And I checked out some of the locations because we were at libraries. Mm-hmm. And the lines were good. One library was wrapped around, and I'm just so happy about that because we sometimes use an excuse that on November 3rd, the only date that we have to go and vote, we can't make it there for some kind of reason. Either it's a health reason, it's working, the hours aren't right. We have it, I know in Chesapeake, we have it Monday through Friday from 10 to 4 at the libraries, and we also have it at the registrar's office. We're also going to have a full day of voting on the 22nd and the 30th, I think it is, of October, the last 2 Saturdays in October. We will have it
31st.
31st, okay. We will have it open for voting. So I would hope that through all of the meetings we've gone through all of the pushing that we have had to get this done, that we would take full advantage of it and be proud about the fact that you don't have just one day. You have a lot of days now that you can go and vote and get this done. And if I could just interject this, Cynthia mentioned something about the absentee ballot. I've been telling people, follow your money. If in fact you've got $1, you're going to find out where that dollar is going to go. If you've got a ballot, if you have an opportunity to vote, follow that ballot. I would personally like for everybody who has one of those to either go to the voting location or either go and drop it off yourself at the locations that they have the drop boxes. Putting it through the mail may not get there. Putting it through the mail, if you're asking for absentee ballot forms and you haven't filled that form out correctly, there might be some time issues going on. So what I'm telling people is follow your dollar. Think that that piece of paper is $1.
Great.
And
And
then, I want to commend Helena and the Chesapeake persons because we had one of the things that we also were able to push through the General Assembly is happens to be the establishment of satellite sites. Chesapeake probably, maybe Norfolk, and I don't know about Virginia Beach, but Chesapeake have an abundance of satellite sites whereby people can vote. Newport News, we only have one satellite site. I think Hampton, we only have one satellite site. Portsmouth, I don't think you have any satellite sites. And so it's been left up to each jurisdiction to decide how many satellite sites they wanted to have. So I want to commend the city of Chesapeake for having not only the number, but the location in terms of the library for people to make it very convenient for people to go out to vote early.
so I think, James, I think I may have heard you. Were you trying to interject?
Yeah, I was just saying, just to piggyback off of what has already been said, Dr. King said a social movement that changes only people is a revolt, but a social movement that changes both people and institutions, that's a revolution. And what we're looking to do is to have a revolutionary movement, right? I think the challenge that we have is, and I told my branch this before, is that we have to move from agitation to infiltration, right? We are great at agitating systems, but now what we have to do is strategically start to infiltrate systems. And we do that through first registering to vote, because if you are not registered, you can't be in the game to infiltrate. But not only just to vote, I mean, beyond that, we got to start looking at the economic development boards. We got to start looking at all the other boards that is down in City Hall. We have to start thinking about that and infiltrating that so that we can stop knocking on the door and actually get inside and open the door for ourselves so that we can be a part in more detail of this process that has marginalized us for so long. So again, I think that's our biggest challenge is now kind of moving to that and what that looks like.
Definitely.
And I also like to say that voting, when individuals think about voting is not an individual task. I want you to think about everyone within your household. If you are going to do early voting, I want you to take a poll of everyone within your household and see if you can take those with you. Check with your neighbors, see if they need transportation, see if they have a plan, if they plan on voting on November 3rd, if they want to wait that long. But do not think of voting as an individual activity. It should be an activity where you get everyone around you involved in your organizations, everyone within your school community, everyone within your religious community. You should be asking the question now, what is your plan? What is your transportation plan? Make sure individuals have water and snacks so that they can sustain themselves if the lines are long, if they want to wait till November 3rd. So do not think of voting as an individual activity. Think of it as a community activity.
Definitely. So that kind of leads me into my next question. What do you say to someone who says my vote doesn't count and I'm not even going to bother? And I think Delegate Price on your side of the water was probably one of the greatest examples of in a situation of respect of your vote does count. One vote.
Absolutely. So we had a tie in the 94th district after all of the votes were counted and canvassed, and it went to the court and they did a recount. And so before legislation that I carried was passed this year, as we know, the infamous bowl was what was used to literally draw the name of the delegate out of a bowl. So just so you know, that bowl is no longer there. We have gotten rid of the bowl. And if there's ever again a tie in a recount, it will go back to a special election. But guess what? If we turn out the vote in higher numbers, we won't have to worry about it coming down to one vote or, court cases. If we turn out in the historic numbers that I know that we can, we won't have to really make it come down to that. But as you're saying, like, these people are going to be chosen whether y'all show up or not. So why not have your voice be heard and be in that number?
Definitely. So your vote does count. So we've already heard so far that in the Virginia House of Delegates, legislation has been passed. Individuals have been fighting and speaking about giving you the opportunity to vote early, not absentee vote, but to vote early. And so we have opportunities throughout our cities here in Hampton Roads to do that. And so I want to go back and just, what would motivate someone? I mean, we know you should go vote, but what are some of the issues that are on that ballot? I mean, when you're casting and you're voting for that individual, what are some of the things that I want to be concerned about. Anybody want to take that one? What is
Yeah,
some-
I would say
Go ahead, James.
yeah, I would say, I mean, it's definitely, I mean, I want to be sensitive to those in our community who have that thought process, because for so long, our community has been marginalized in the political system. We have to be honest and real about that. But the only way that we change that is by getting involved with it, right? I mean, let's take a look at what this special session, I mean, we all know what's going on in our nation right now in terms of police brutality. But one of the big things that we could do in order to make sure that we have accountability in police departments is citizen review boards that operate separate from the police department. Well, in order for us to get bills like that in the General Assembly, first of all, you had to have a charter change, which is done in the General Assembly. So you had to have individuals in the General Assembly who were supporting that, who was going to move that forward for us. So even though I know, yes, I'm sensitive towards that understanding, but the reality of it is, in order for us to change it, we got to be involved in it so we can get important legislation like that through to change our environment.
Definitely. So, I've always said, I didn't even mention about my other hat. So you all in my sister organization, NAACP, I'm with the National Urban League. And I've always told people there's a three-legged stool to this thing. There's advocacy, activism, and then there's policy. And far too often we've seen so much of the agitation, with protests and so forth, but nobody wants to carry it through. And Delegate Price could definitely probably tell you there are individuals who are lobbying her and visiting her about every other issue in there, but it probably gets down and you see very few individuals who look like you, who are advocating for things that should be addressing them. So you think about it, the ballot, but then it's a continuation until the next election day that we should really be focusing on, right?
Absolutely.
There's one thing that we should also remember is that we should encourage our youth to be out there exercising their right to vote and to let them know why. I think it's if they're 18 years old by the November date that they are and registered, they are able to vote at that time. And those things matter. We need to really reinforce or refresh their memories of history and what our people have gone through, struggled through, for us to have the opportunity to express our opinion in that voting booth. So I think that we need to do a much better job of encouraging our youth to get out there and vote.
Definitely. So are there any questions from the in the comment section? I haven't seen, so I'll take an opportunity for anybody who, if there is. If there isn't, we'll continue. Nope. Okay, well, we will continue on. So I want to ask this one because I know I've talked about some of the issues, but how will voting support efforts? We've heard a lot about criminal justice reform. How will voting this November in any of our elections affect criminal justice reform and those efforts?
Delegate Marcia, you could give a good example.
I was like, look, y'all tap me in whenever. I don't want to impose. But listen, so many of our young people, including those in present company, were on the front lines and they have a list of demands. Your organizations have lists of demands that have been communicated to us just as the federal level, but you don't get to a Justice in Policing Act, or you don't get to the answers of any of those demands without elected officials and appointed officials, period. So if we want civilian review boards, you got to understand that you have to have a majority of the folks that are in the General Assembly in order to get that. And while states are wondering whether or not no-knock warrants are good or bad, actually, if the Senate, the United States Senate, would just pick up and discuss the Justice in Policing Act that the House of Representatives has passed, that has a no-knock warrants ban for the entire nation. So you don't have to worry about whether or not a governor would sign it or not. It could pass on the federal level, along with, if not all, definitely most of what has been demanded from historic organizations. So to understand the role of your mayor, the role of your board of supervisors, to understand who picks the police chief, how does the sheriff elected, your Commonwealth's attorney is a major player in this, potentially one of the more powerful people when it comes to criminal justice reform, because we can, tell them to do things, but the way that they have discretion is super powerful. And to also remember that next next year's election is just as important because the legislature chooses judges. And that is something that not a lot of people know. So any demand that you have had from the front line, understand a legislator or someone who is elected has a role in helping or not, depending upon who we elect.
Anyone like to add to that? I know you guys have been on the front lines and
Absolutely. I like to add that it's important to be on the front line behind the scenes as well. And for instance, we are pushing the Citizen Review Board in the city of Virginia Beach. Our incoming police chief, who also came from the same area as our recent city manager, is used to working with a Citizen Review Board. And so it is critical to know about the individuals that are being hired, that are being appointed for your future things that you want down the road. And so since he's used to working with a Citizen Review Board, hopefully the likelihood of Virginia Beach getting a Citizen Review Board has been elevated, as opposed to coming up against the establishment who was totally against the Citizen Review Board and wanted to police themselves. And they haven't been very effective in policing themselves at all.
Another thing that I would like to say with that is we still have to move to get that Citizen Review Board, but we can't wait to have that approved. We have to deal with actions and deal with things that come to us as they come. We can't wait for sometimes all of the letter writing and all of the signatures. So it's very important that you have a communication with your police department, with your chief of police. And we're fortunate in, I just got to talk about Chesapeake. We're fortunate in Chesapeake that Chief Wright is our chief of police, and he has come on with the NAACP to give information through a virtual conversation. And, we were one of the first cities to come about with the cameras. So we have that working relationship, even though we're still pushing towards that Citizens Review Board. It still has to be a communication within before you get all of that stuff signed off.
Along those lines, that was one of the reasons, though, when you look at the Citizen Review Board, the NAACP, in terms of the position we took on the state level, was that we wanted to be a mandatory, that it be mandated the localities actually establish a Citizen Review Board, because otherwise, and I share with people, it's nothing new with us here in the term of Citizen Review Boards. We've had them around for years, but basically it was a local option. And so we were always told, well, you got to push it at the local level. Well, I told folks, hey, I know where that can is going to go to, because we've been pushing it for a long time at the local level, and it hasn't gotten that far around the state for all of the localities. So that's one of the reasons why people didn't understand. They told us, well, you have some things, why don't you be happy with this, versus going with the mandatory or mandating that we have the Citizen Review Boards. But when we know when we have that local option, that it's going to depend upon how many of us want to put that energy on the local level to fight and push to make it happen. Thank God you have a great representative in Chesapeake, but then we better not brag too much until we do a check and evaluate how great he is when you look at some of the things that we are asking for. And so we are developing on the state level with the Political Action Committee. We're actually putting together a list whereby we can evaluate those persons who have a Citizen Review Board. And if you don't have one, we can provide those tools to you so you'll know what and how to set up a Citizen Review Board, or what you should include with in terms of some of the things that should be required of one.
Yes.
That's right. That's right. And even like you said, going to Madam Vice President, is the things that are in it are important, i.e. subpoena authority. I mean, that's one of the things that we put in what we're asking for, because if you don't have things like that, it just becomes what we already have, and we're not interested in what we already have, right? This thing has to have teeth. But not only that, real quick, not only what we're seeing with the review boards, but things that we're seeing like with plea bargains that disproportionately affect African Americans. As Delegate Price was saying, some of the things that Commonwealth attorneys can and can't do. You know, a lot of that stuff, the internal things that happen that really don't get a lot of attention, but still yet marginalizes our people day in and day out in the criminal justice system. It's an opportunity for us to do that. But again, we have to be able to control systems. And again, you got to make sure that we hold people accountable, because I'll say it publicly. You have some people who are elected that still do not fall within what helps our people. I.e., I got a representative in Portsmouth that is supposed to be a Democrat, but he votes continuously against our agenda, which is a problem, right? So I'll say that publicly, and I hope he's watching this. But yeah, we just got to be smart and strategic.
Definitely. So I want to kind of shift it a little bit, staying on the same context. This coming November, of course, we've got president, vice president, we've got a U.S. senator, congressional elections that are going on. But you've probably seen a whole lot of things being played out on the media. The occupant of the White House announced on Saturday that he has a pick to replace Justice Ginsburg on the U.S. Supreme Court. So in many respects, this coming November is the Supreme Court on the ballot and the many effects that it could potentially have. So I pose that out there to you. And what could some of those things be?
I just don't even like you to even ask that question because number one, on a moral standpoint, we couldn't even give Ginsburg the recognition that she was due and to honor the last thing that she said she would like to do. Mm-hmm. But I know that we're going to have some big issues, and maybe the delegate can, because I've been wondering this for a long time, how in the world do we have a position anywhere that's never evaluated and you can stay on there forever? That needs to be a change, because once someone gets that judgeship, you can stay on there forever. How does that happen? What do we need? This is a question I'm asking you because I was going to bring it up to somebody else. How do we get to a point that there is a limitation of what's done? And how do we get to a point that there is an evaluation of what's done? And another thing that we don't do too well at doing, and I'm guilty of that, is writing. People need to understand in writing what we want done, and we need to hold them accountable for answering us of what we want done and how we can get it done. So my question is on that Senate thing, you brought it up, Mr. Clanton, on that Senate piece, how do we turn this thing around that someone isn't in a position forever?
Well, I can definitely say that from the last thing I just heard is I do believe within the Democratic caucus in Congress, there is actually a bill that's being produced now looking at term limits of 18 years for Supreme Court, members of the Supreme Court, okay. And which would literally give every president every 4 years an opportunity to appoint 2 justices to the U.S. Supreme Court. It is it says it's life-term appointment. You can make that change there. But the other thing, like you said, you're there, and here it is. We've had one president who's literally had 3 and shouldn't have had that many, based on, some of the hypocrisy that's going on out there. But again, it goes back to what Delegate Price has even said. You've got to ensure that you've got people in place to be able to carry through the bills and the things that are going to help your community. And so when I asked this question about the U.S. Supreme Court, we know that Obamacare, and the individual that's been selected has said that they're not for it. There are a lot of things that the vote, and I've asked this question not for any political reason and respect, but really to get people to think. Your vote has a domino effect. If you don't show up, just like Delegate Price and others have said, if you don't show up, somebody's showing up in your place and your vote isn't counted. Your not showing up is a vote. it's a vote of not being present and accounted for. And that's what we're talking about. Today's session is about your vote counts and being in the count. So, you know, if this bill is coming forward, go ahead.
You know, it was so funny after the election, 2016 election, when folks the next day, people found out who was elected, people took to the streets to protest. Really, it has been stated that many of those folks who were out there protesting didn't even go the day before to vote.
That's right.
And had those persons just gone out to vote, there would have been a different election in terms of who would have been in the White House right now. So just to look at that. But people have been very strategic in terms of why they are voting. And when I say strategic, we go in and vote because we say we want to represent or we want to elect a certain person because they are with a certain party. And we stop with it there. We don't sit back and say, well, what's our agenda? What do we want this person to do for us if they get our votes? We have to think early on. And I've watched it repeatedly whenever an election comes up and I'm campaigning and working with various folks. When we go to different populations and different ethnic groups, there's an agenda that they hand over to the candidate. These are the things that count for us. How are you going to vote? What's your position on these things? And we have to learn to do the same thing when people come to us. We have to know up front what it is we want from you, because you surely are asking for something from me. And so it's an exchange and it's a compromise. But if we just say, hey, we're glad to see you, you showed up, I hope you come back again, we don't put that demand out there, nothing's gonna happen. Now, the other side has already stacked the Supreme Court. We have almost, with this last, well, it is a conservative court. So those persons who've been going out voting, it has been their desire to change the makeup of our Supreme Court and to have more conservative justices on that court. And you know why they want it? Because of the issues such as abortion rights, such as rolling back, what else? Voter rights.
Voter rights.
Obamacare. They know what they want to do, and they know how and what they need to do to make that happen. We have to think the same way.
Definitely.
I'd like to add that also in terms of the court, voting, sometimes we look at voting as an offensive stance in terms of, you know, educating ourselves about different platforms, but also sometimes you need to look at voting as a defensive stance of what you don't want, to get what you don't want out of a particular position. And I don't think that as a community that we think sometimes in a defensive stance, we think more of an offensive stance in terms of thinking about what people, what platforms people have and what we agree with. But sometimes look at what you disagree with and band together to remove what you disagree with so that you can get someone in there who agrees with the same things that you agree with, the same changes that you want in your community, the same laws and policies that you back. But we don't think on both sides of the spectrum. A lot of times, I rarely hear individuals, they'll say, well, I'm not voting at all. Those individuals who say I'm not voting at all, they'll say because they don't agree with something for a particular candidate. But okay, are you good with what you have now? Because if you're not good with what you have now, then how about you vote from a defensive strategy and vote to get what you disagree with out of where it is now that's impacting everyone's lives. So I think we have to look on both sides of the spectrum when it comes to impacting the courts and voting. It needs to be offensive as well as defensive if you're unsatisfied with what is already in the system.
Yeah, I think it's definitely on the it's definitely on the ballot. I mean, you can look at our history. You take a look at Brown v. Board. I mean, that was a court that did not have a ideology that was more originalist or conservative, as that's popularly known on the court. And I mean, it's definitely on the ballot. I mean, if you I mean, if partisan, just want to make that, but I'm just saying, if you're looking at ideology, if Trump is elected again, possibly you can have a serious shift in the Supreme Court for generations. I mean, even his nominee now, she's what, in her 40s? I mean, she has the potential to be on the court for 30, 40 years. You know what I mean? That is a long time in terms of civil rights. Yeah, that's a long, you're talking about legacy and controlling the country. I mean, I mean, that's so, I mean, it's definitely on the ballot, and I mean, we need to think that way as well.
You know, I'm glad that Dr. Karen said something about it being defensive, because I don't know who said this, but I do remember somebody saying that not voting is not a protest. It is a surrender. If you don't vote, you are surrendering. So I think people need to remember that that's not a protest.
Definitely. So I'll throw it in here because we've got about a good 10 more minutes before we start heading into some of the wrap-up comments here. But I started noticing it today. I was working out this morning in the gym and I was on the treadmill. And so typically my news is going, and about every other commercial was an ad. And we knew we start to see things on, social, and, we heard about Facebook and Twitter. But what are some of the trusted sites? What are the trusted places that people can get information when they're trying to make an informed decision this coming November? What are some of the suggestions of places and where they can get information from?
I would say,
I know that I think every time we have an election, because we are doing things like this, and people know who we are and they recognize our involvement in the system, persons take the time to call. I get calls from Suffolk, Norfolk, Newport News, all over the state. Hey, who should we vote for? We have the election coming up. So the more we have people out here advocating and becoming involved, that's one thing we can do. We can reach out to those trusted persons. Then we also have the faith community, who have over the years have become very active within becoming politically active, developing political action committees, and also just holding various seminars, just like we're doing now, to involve people and to educate folks. We have to take advantage of those things and to let people know who folks are. They can't look at Facebook and pick up everything on Facebook. Matter of fact, we learned from 2016 that the African-American community was targeted with fake news. That's where the fake news was in terms of what was happening in the community and who to vote for. And sad to say, so many of us will pick up what we find on Facebook and run with it.
That's true. Right, so what should someone do? I know we've got early voting, okay? Well, what if somebody finds themselves in a position of being disenfranchised or being told they can't vote or given misinformation? Who should they contact?
NAACP is one of the places they can contact.
So what are some of the things that the NAACP is doing to ensure a fair and safe voting process this coming?
Well, right now, while we are on this call, we're doing a voter protection call tonight and Thursday night, so we can start training persons in terms of what needs to happen with voter protection. So we have the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights out of DC, who are also training a team of lawyers. And matter of fact, they're recruiting lawyers on the local level to be available. But we are, from the NAACP, training our troops right now. What time is it, James? 8 o'clock? We're supposed to get started. And then again on Wednesday night, we're training our advocates to be prepared for election protection.
And I think too, most of our units are sharing information as we get it, like the training that we're going to have. We normally share that information, if it's by Facebook, if it's to the religious branches that we deal with, but we're trying to get the information out. And we're asking them to call us with information so that we can check on it.
Definitely.
And I would say one thing too, there is a call for elections workers. So for poll
Right.
workers on the inside. So like sometimes you get accidentally disenfranchised just because somebody got bad information or, you know, really well intentioned but gave out some misinformation, and then sometimes it's just egregious. But if you know you're going to go to the training and learn everything and do it well, they are looking for those poll workers that that can do it in a safe way. Like, you know, if you're high risk, go on and stay home, but you know, that can be at the polling place to get people in the right direction.
Definitely.
Also, with our Greek lettered organizations, during previous years, we've come together with the Panhellenic, and we've actually developed, Marcia, you helped one year with the NAACP develop election protection volunteers, a whole team of volunteers, and they work the precincts on election day with the t-shirts. If persons had questions, if they were turned around, if they weren't able to vote, we had persons, volunteers from the Divine Nine, who were actually at those polling places to provide information to persons. So, and we had hotlines. So start listening for the hotline, the toll-free line that we can, you'll have that number. So if you encounter any problems, and the hotline, the toll-free line really works statewide. So you can call that number. We actually have a boiler room where those numbers come into. We have lawyers there. The lawyers will get the questions, come to us and ask what's going on. Who do you know in this locality that we can check this information out, because the voter says they're having a problem. So trust me, it works. If you have a problem, don't turn around and don't do anything. Make sure you reach out. And matter of fact, take that toll-free number with you when you go to the polls to vote.
Definitely. And so there are a couple of dates I just want to re-emphasize here. So Virginia election deadlines, October 13th is the last day to register to vote. So we've got a little less than a month here, October 13th. And so that's definitely, if you are a 18-year-old and you're going to be 18 by the time of the election.
17-year-old.
17. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be 18, 17
Right.
by the time of the election. You can still register. Now, I had my registrar on a live show that I do, and I thought it was kind of important because I had a couple parents who were concerned because, you know, now you have to get appointments at the DMV. And they were like, well, I've got to get my son or my daughter a driver's license or an ID. But in fact, thank you, Delegate Price and others in the General Assembly, because you don't need that type of identification. You can use your student ID to just identify who you are, or even a bill like it used to be. So we thank you for that. October 23rd is the last day to request an absentee ballot. And I was going to show this. Mine came in the mail. It's probably disappearing here, but I will be filling it out. And Ms. Dodson, I will be placing it in the box. I want to make sure it's counted.
Okay.
October 31st is the last day to vote in person. Okay.
24th and 31st.
October 31st is the last day to vote early in person. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And then on November 3rd, of course, so, you know, there are a lot of things that we talked about that are on the ballot. And so I'm teeing this up here for Delegate Price, because not only are we voting for individuals, but there are issues on the ballot. And so we got to remember that, you know, in many instances, don't just fill out the front of the ballot. You got to flip that thing over, because there's other important issues on the back. And so Delegate Price, would you like to share with us some of those issues on the state level that we should be paying attention to?
Yes, so like, as you said, in addition to the candidates, there are two proposed constitutional amendments. One is a little less controversial, and that's the second one. So I'm jumping to the second one first. And that is basically tax relief on property tax for those disabled veterans. And so that is a way that some feel we can say thank you to those that have served. And so that is a tax relief on property tax for disabled veterans. Okay, so now jumping back to the first one, that is on redistricting. And so I don't want to assume that everybody knows the same. So redistricting is how the congressional, state, Senate, and state House lines are drawn. So like the census that we're hoping that everybody fills out, I think the newest date that I heard for the deadline was October 5th. So we have just a couple more days for everyone to be counted. But next year, using this year's census data, we will draw the districts. And so for instance, for the House of Delegates, there's 100 districts. So we will take the population and as best we can split it up across those 100 districts. So there were 8.3 million last time. So we ended up with about 83,000 in each of the House districts. So the problem is sometimes, and Hampton Roads, we know this well, when people were drawing these districts, they were done in a way to either favor a group or disfavor a group, and that's called gerrymandering. And so the commission is supposed to be something that addresses gerrymandering. And a lot of us have fought for independent, nonpartisan redistricting reform. And that's what we were hoping for in this amendment. But I am here to let you know that that's what it's not. And so I will answer questions and anything. And I'm very honest with you. I want you to vote no. And I want you to vote no for the following reasons. And I acknowledge this is not the sexiest topic, but for all of the things that we just mentioned, how these districts are drawn impacts the composition of the legislative bodies, which impacts the policy proposals that will or will not pass out of it for what you may care about. But basically, this commission would establish 16 people. And so let me imagine that you're at a table and you have 8 people on one side, 8 people on the other. So on this side, the 8 people are all legislators. They're all legislators like me, but it probably wouldn't be me. And let me tell you why. So there are 2 Democrats from the House, 2 Democrats from the Senate, 2 Republicans from the House, and 2 Republicans from the Senate. So half of the commission is legislators. Those are chosen by the party leaders. And so you have the Speaker of the House, the Minority Leader, the President Pro Tem, and the Minority Leader of the Senate. Again, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats that each choose 2. So then you've been told that there's citizens for the rest of it. And you may be thinking of yourself as a citizen that could be a member. You might be thinking about PTA moms, grandmas in the NAACP, just regular people. And you might also think about a commission application process because people serve on boards and commissions all the time. But I really encourage every single person before you vote to read the actual amendment. There is nothing in this amendment that says any of those things is true. What happens is those same 4 party leaders come up with a list of people that they want to serve on the commission. Let me say that again. The party leaders come up with a list of people that they want to serve on the commission. And then 5 retired judges choose from those submitted lists. Okay, are you ready to get, okay. So that is by definition not citizen-led when the legislators are picking the citizens. And so I pose the question, politics is dirty. Why would any partisan leader pick someone on that list that was not already fully aligned with their agenda? So that leaves out third party, it leaves out independent, and it leaves out those of us that have been vocal against leadership throughout the years because we can't be trusted to go along with the plan. So you end up with 8 legislators and 8 people that the party leaders have approved of in order to be on this. The other thing is, it doesn't say who they can or can't be. They could be lobbyists, they could be consultants, former legislators, family members of former legislators. The amendment is silent on this, meaning it could be anybody that the party leaders choose. There's also no mandated diversity for this commission. So out of those 16 people, you could legally end up with an all white, all male, all Northern Virginia, and all Medicare age commission, picking lines for Hampton Roads. Like, this is a step backwards. And so to be clear, the legislators pick the legislators pick the pool of the citizens from which the 8 will be chosen from. And then the legislators have had a role in choosing those retired judges. And so it's like the legislators, we have our fingerprints on this from start to finish. So I think the most important critique that I have about this amendment is the protections for communities of color that are lacking in how the district should be drawn. And some say that pointing to the 14th Amendment or the Voting Rights Act is enough. And I want to remind people historically, the 14th, 15th, and 19th Amendments were in place during Jim Crow. The 14th, 15th, and 19th, they were not enough on their own to prevent us from being fully taken advantage of. Poll taxes and everything, all of the shenanigans that happened at the polls. In addition, this current Supreme Court, prior to Justice Ginsburg passing, was fully okay. The majority was fully okay with political gerrymandering. So we can't point to God knows what we're going to get out of this new Supreme Court. And it's really bad. So after 400 years of race-based shenanigans, in 2020, we do not need to embrace a constitutional amendment that does not do enough to protect communities of color in Trump's America. And this amendment has been, last point, this amendment has been described as nonpartisan, but it's actually hyperpartisan. So in your sororities, fraternities, and NAACP, if you have a proposal before you and the vote is 14-2, does it pass or fail? And everybody says it passes because 14-2, you know, it's the democratic process. Well, in this amendment, you can have a map that passes 14-2 and it fails because 2 Democratic senators or 2 Republican senators or 2 Republican House members or 2 Democratic House members can stick together and say no, and that prevents the map from passing. If that happens twice, it gets kicked to the Supreme Court. Now, civics lesson, who picks the justices for the Supreme Court in the Commonwealth of Virginia? Mm-hmm. If you said legislators, you would be correct. Mm-hmm. So from start to finish, legislators have our fingerprints in this. And so it is just really, really, really important that people understand I am a legislator and I am telling you to take us out of this process. This is ridiculous. And I will just share that if you may not know me, then you may know Congressman Bobby Scott, Congressman Donald McEachin, all 20 House members of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, 45 members of the House Democratic Caucus, the Democratic Party of Virginia, New Virginia Majority, Progress Virginia, SEIU, Fair Districts Virginia, the former chair of One Virginia 2021, Linda Perriello, and lead plaintiff of the 2019 Supreme Court case, Golden Bethune-Hill, all join me in asking you to vote no. And so I will stop there.
Thank you, Virginia State Conference, NAACP, we haven't released our position, but yes, one other thing I want to add now, there are some persons who look like us who are lobbyists out there lobbying against and encouraging us to vote yes. Trust me, and I think you will state the same thing, Delegate Price. Those are lobbyists. They are paid lobbyists, and there's plenty of money being put on this for folks to advocate for a yes vote for that amendment. So again, you ask about who we should look for in towards in the community. One just spoke, another one, and I think Helena Youth NAACP, and we have several other folks, and all of those persons you mentioned, Delegate Price, we need to listen to on this amendment and vote no.
Definitely. So we actually received 2 comments, questions that came in. So I'm going to start backwards on this quickly. If you've moved from Virginia Beach to Chesapeake, what is the process to change your address? And is it too late now to participate in early voting? Anybody want to take that one? I can answer.
So it's definitely not too late. I'll jump in. It's definitely not too late. That is the October 13th deadline. So when we say registration deadline, that is updating information as well. And you can do that in some localities the day you register. It may be a 5-day waiting period before you can vote, but you can go on and do it before October 13th. One very, very, very important piece of information is if you should accidentally forget, you still can vote. You just have to go to the voting precinct of where your old address was. Do not think that that means that you can't vote. You just got to go back. But if you go to elections.virginia.gov, that's where you can sign into your citizen portal and you can update your information. That's also where you can request your absentee ballot should you need it.
And track it. So the last question I have here is, what is the specific plan to encourage citizens of color, age 40 and younger, to go vote? Is there a plan?
Well, I can share with you some of the things. I don't want to monopolize all of the time, but we are doing a series. I am personally a series of these events in terms of just talking with our faith community who in the Hampton and on the peninsula have put together a transportation plan whereby they will be advertising to the Newport News and Hampton communities that they are going to pick persons up if they need a ride to early vote. So they're putting that together now. We are also reaching out and providing information with important dates to remember. We're providing that information to the faith community as well as to our connection communities. Our connection committees and our social action committees with our Divine Nine. So we're doing those type of things. And many persons, many of our talk shows, we have persons who are volunteering from the community to reach out. One more thing I've been telling people, fish where you are. We keep talking about going out here. I guarantee you, we would make a list of our family members, our church members, our relationship folks, that people we've developed a relationship. We're going to find someone who either has not registered or they haven't voted. And when we talk about a plan, if they don't have a plan to vote, you make the plan for them. You don't have a plan, you haven't voted, come on, I'm taking you to vote now. That's the plan.
Well, I'm going to leave it with that. I appreciate everyone and allowing me the opportunity to serve as your moderator this evening, and definitely for all the words of insight and encouragement on the front lines of what you all are doing. I'm encouraging everyone to be a part of the process and to not sit back. So at this time, I am going to turn it back over to Ms. Torian Johns, who is going to introduce the wonderful chapter president of the Iota Omega chapter here to give us some final closing remarks.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Right now, we will have remarks from our illustrious president of the Iota Omega chapter, the oldest chapter in the Tidewater region of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Miss Kathy Moore.
You're muted.
I think Ms. Moore's still muted. There we go.
All right, we're good to go. Good evening. Thank you so much. What a wonderful night. I am Kathy Wilson Moore, president of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Iota Omega chapter of Norfolk, Virginia. And as my sister, Ms. Johns, has already stated, our chapter has been serving the citizens of Norfolk since 1922. So for 98 years, we have been serving the citizens of Norfolk. As part of our Alpha Kappa Alpha 100-day countdown and part of our Get Out the Vote program and our AKA's LEAD program, and LEAD is the acronym for Learn, Empower, Advocate, and Decide. We are thankful to our panelists and moderator in their collaboration with us to assist our community in becoming knowledgeable about voting in the 2020 general election, particularly with our voter education, our registration, our mobilization, and participation. We are thankful to the NAACP and our relationship to meet our desired goal of registering more than 25,000 new voters nationwide. National Voter Registration Day was September 22nd, and we are still continuing our efforts. And I would like to say I enjoyed the conversation tonight. I have already early voted. And in Virginia Beach, I have been an election official for 13 years. And just a little noteworthy piece, Virginia Beach has had an average of 940 persons vote early since it began on last Friday. So we are motivated and we are moving. And this panelist is part of the reason why we are motivated and we are moving. I am forever grateful for the presence of our Alpha Kappa Alpha members present tonight and for serving as outstanding panelists. I'm always so proud of my sisters. Our moderator, Carlos Clanton, member of the Norfolk School Board. Our guest speakers, Helena Dodson, president of the Chesapeake NAACP, Dr. Karen Pruden, president of the Virginia Beach NAACP, James Boyd, president of the Portsmouth NAACP, and the Honorable Delegate Marsha S. Price, representing the 95th District, that includes the cities of Hampton and Newport News. And last but not least, Cynthia Downs Taylor, Vice President of the State of Virginia NAACP. And delegate, I was so very happy to hear that that bowl has been retired. I watched that in amazement last year, and I'm glad to see that it is now officially retired. Again, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated thanks you, and our local community thanks you for your work in strengthening our democracy. Now let's all go vote, and vote early, and take someone else with you to vote. Thank you so much. And my sister Johns, I will relinquish the floor back to you.
Mr. Clanton.
Yes.
I would be remiss in not mentioning the fact that the NAACP is looking for members. We need workers, we need members, and we need you to join the local NAACP. That's a plug for everybody who's out here. We need you. We need you. There is something that you can do. I have one lady, and I'm going to get offline, but I have one lady who can't come to meetings, and she can't do a lot of stuff, but she can stay on the telephone. And she is a worker. So there is always something you can do. And we're the cheapest organization in town, right, Ms. Taylor?
You got it. And thank you for that plug. Both of us have probably been involved with the NAACP for more than 40 years. And I know my years date back then, and it's the hardest job to do, non-paying job, but we love it. We haven't gone anyplace.
Definitely. Well, thank you, everyone. And if there's nothing else to be said, vote on November 3rd. And thank you again, the lovely ladies of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, for hosting this tonight. And you all, remember, get your game plan, your election day plan together, and take someone else to the polls. You all have a
November 3rd.
November 3rd.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.